last Wednesday, we started talking about optimal choice. So I motivated this course as people's most preferred choice. In other words, what gives them greatest satisfaction or pleasure given their constraint in terms of limited resources. In other words, limited income. Okay? Now, today, what we are going to do is essentially derive the concept of at least demand from that optimal choice. In other words, now when we talk about economics, the word economics, microeconomics, whatever, or market, the first thing that comes to my mind, or first thing that comes to your mind is demand and supply. If I say market, what's your first impression of it? And then people are just going to say 재래시장, or or 수요, 공급, etc. I mean, people are incredibly predictable in this sort of respect. Those who took my behavior finance course last semester would know this. This is called something called availability heuristic, by the way. The fact that some things are ingrained in your memory so you can catch them much quicker. Okay? So this is a slight aside, but just to motivate this, there's an experiment that did. Now, can you name as many words beginning with letter K, and then can you name how many, whatever words that not begin, but has letter K on the third letter? And then the experiment asks subjects, which of the two will appear more in the English dictionary? Words that begin with K, or words that have K in the third letter? Yeah? K로 시작하는 단어 뭐가 있을까요? Key. What begins with K? King, keep, can, kilo, kilometer, etc. Right? Kill. Who said kill? Okay, well, we can have lots of variations on that. Kill, killed, killer, killing, whatever, yeah? What about words with letter K on the third letter? Cake. So we can all Coke. Huh? Acknowledge. That's great. Anything else? See? So it's human behavior, human minds work in specific ways. It's like a homepage, a website. You have the top menu, middle menu, bottom menu, etc. Our mind organizes knowledge into that sort of material so that, when we say K, then you always think about, especially those who are preparing for study abroad or trying to apply for graduate school somewhere, you'll be like, oh, where's my GRE notebook? GRE 단어장에 뭐 있었는데, kale, whatever. But our sequence gets broken when we have K on the third letter. We have to actually search like a Google engine would, ourselves. And that takes much slower. So people say, 90% plus of the subjects say, words beginning with letter K is more likely to appear on English dictionary. But the answer is actually the reverse is true. Letter on the third letter. Because, already, bake, cake, make, take, lake, now going to use the word naked, whatever, etc., etc., yeah? So the variety is actually more diverse, but it's just that we don't get it out of our memory as quickly as possible. It's not as available. Okay? Now, the reason why I brought you this is demand and supply, or supply and demand, whichever way. is a very well-known concept, especially if you took high school economics and everything was done using demand supply, which shifts where, what does what, etc., etc. But we gotta go a step further. We gotta do something better than that. As second-year university students, we gotta claim we have more knowledge than that. What I'm gonna tell you through today's lecture and over the next week is that that concept of demand, in other words, that downward sloping demand curve, is actually a product or a construct of your own optimal choice. Okay? And we're going to break down that optimal choice into different effects and how that's going to differ between goods. Okay? But to do that, we need to go back to our optimal choice first. So, assuming that the preferences are well behaved, if you had a budget set like that, then this point wasn't optimal. It was a point where you're using your entire income because you're on the budget line, but the optimal point is here. Well, I mean, it should sort of be tangent. It's where you're most outward in terms of your preference, your indifference curve. In other words, where you attain the highest level of utility. Then, that consumption bundle, X1, generally when you say it's the most preferred, you denote it with a star. X2 star is a function of this budget constraint, right? Yep. So in other words, this x1 star and x2 star can be expressed as a function of its price, the other good's price, and income. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Okay? Now, last Wednesday, in terms of a well-behaved preference, we learned about something called Cobb-Douglas preferences. 콥-다글라스 수용함수라는 것에 대해서 배웠습니다. 그죠? And we said that would have a very useful property. I didn't tell you what then. I can tell you today exactly what that is, okay? Now, Cobb-Douglas utility functions are in the form of this, right? We all agree, right? Yep. Now, what did I say about the uniqueness of utility function? 효용 함수가 하나의 형태로만 나타날 수 있습니까? So, cardinality of utility doesn't matter, which means as long as you preserve the order of consumption bundles, in other words, if you prefer x1, x bundle x to bundle y, then you assign a greater number to x than to y. x를 y보다 더 좋아하면 x에 더 큰 숫자를 부여하기만 하면 that's a valid utility function. It's not unique. And the most important thing is that it's not unique to monotonic transformation. So what I'm going to do is take log of this and define a new utility function like this. Log of xy equals log xy는 어떻게 나타낼 수 있죠? Basically, at the last lecture on econometrics lecture, there was no, unfortunate, I mean, this is, by the way, not indication of any sort, by the way, but the sole foreign exchange student taking the lecture was not available there. And then suddenly people was all willing to talk in Korean and really engage in the lecture. I don't know why, okay? But there we are. So log x1 alpha plus log x2 1 minus alpha. Can we do anything further with this? Alpha log x1 plus 1 minus alpha log x2. Why do I do that? Because it's a lot easier to calculate its partial derivative. What's the partial derivative of this new utility function with respect to x1? Anyone? Anders, do you want to have a go? Alpha over x1 is your marginal utility with respect to x1. So alpha over x1. What about mu2? 1 minus alpha over x2. Correct. And that, when you equate MRS, well, minus of that, with minus of the relative price, you can ignore minus. Yep. We're going to get, that's essentially what we get here, right? Now, it's all math. You know, it's nothing wrong about it. All I'm saying is that the slope of the indifference curve has to equal the slope of the budget constraint. 예산선의 기울기와 무차별 곡선의 기울기가 같다. Nothing more, right? Now, what can I do? I want to express my optimal. Now, I'm going to do calculations first and give you the intuition later, okay? I'm going to find out my optimal consumption of x1 only as a function of p2, p1, and m. So I need to substitute out this x2. Yep. So x2 equals what? p1, p2, x1, 1 minus alpha over alpha. Yep. Which is what I've written down just there. Okay? What you can do now is just throw that into your budget constraint. Like here. But knowing this x2 is given by that in the optimum, you can just do this. And then suddenly they're going to go. So we're going to have p1 x1 1 minus alpha over alpha equals 0. Okay? Or, but you can take that out. So math is right. Yep. I mean, all mathematical at the moment. And if you throw this in here, you get alpha m. So alpha clashes, and we get p2 x2 equals that. Or let me put it down here. If you're good with math, you will already have noticed something, a very useful property. Can you see what that is? What's the meaning of P1 times X1? Your expenditure on good 1. P2 X2 is likely the same. The money, the expenditure, total amount of expenditure you spend on good 2. What that's saying is, if this consumer exhibits the same preference throughout his career for, like, say, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, what that means is this. You always spend a given fraction of income on good 1 and the rest on good 2. Intuitively speaking, what does that mean? It's like saying this. My life is very stable. So I generally spend about 30% on housing, 20% on food, 20% on travel, 10% on my daughter's whatever, etc. If you allocate a given stable fraction of your income to each good. Now, the Cobb-Douglas result generalizes to many, many, many goods, by the way. So you can have x1, x2, x3, x4, x3, etc., and then it will just get the same result. So Cobb-Douglas utility function works incredibly well to describe the preferences of a consumer who stably and predictably spends given fraction of income on a particular good. That's the important thing. So, for example, I don't know much about your life and I don't want to speculate on it, but so assume without loss of generality that, who am I going to give as example? Raphael, for example, spends 20% on transport, 20% on rent, 30% on travel, and 30% on food and drinks. Okay? Then 여기 power 있잖아요. The 승수라고 하는 것들 우리. The power on each good represents that fraction of income you spend on that good. Very neat. That's why we use Cobb-Douglas preferences a lot. It's a very nice property. And in fact, we individually may change our preferences from time to time. For example, when I hopefully become a lot richer at some point in my life, I would love to spend more on cars. Okay? I want to be able to drive, say, I don't know, Audi A7 or something like that, whatever. Yeah? Okay. But you need to be able to describe the aggregate preferences of consumers as well. Aggregate, on aggregate. In other words, now there's a huge debate over whether you can treat everyone in Korea like one representative consumer times 50 million or not. But leaving that aside, assume you can. Okay? And there are certain circumstances under you can do that. It's really restrictive, but you can. Then, generally, what we find from economic studies is that overall, in other words, on aggregate, people spending on major categories of items, clothing, transport, food and drink, housing, or in Korea, private tuition. 사교육 is a very important aspect of our consumer spending, as we all can demonstrate. It's been a source of my major income throughout my university days. And I think it's like kind of getting the money back from what I've spent before. It's like, you can kind of understand the sentiment, yeah? But one thing we find is that people's preferences don't change overnight. Generally, the people's fraction of income spent on various goods tend to be stable across time. Now, over time, it does change. We do a lot more foreign travel than we used to. First time I went abroad was when I was 13. My daughter went abroad at the age of 2. I mean, when we went on a family trip to Japan a couple of months ago. So, yes, it changes. But over a certain specific period of time, people tend to spend a relatively stable fraction of income on each major category. And that's the reason why we use this Cobb-Douglas preferences. Apart from the fact that it's quite easy to calculate in terms of derivatives also. Okay? So, yeah, that's what I said here already. And that's what we are going to do a lot next week. Okay? Until now, I mean, we're not going to do this today, but next week, definitely. What we're going to do is we worked under the premise that we know consumers' preferences, okay? And we also know people's budget constraints. What are their optimal choice? That's all good. Problem is we don't observe people's decision-making process. Yep. If we do, that would be great. I mean, in the world of artificial intelligence, certain robots might appear with we having some sort of an RF chip attached to our head, and our brain's thought process might integrate into that computer at certain days. I hope that day never comes before I die. You know, I mean, when I want to drink, that robot will know that I want to drink. That's not a world I want to live in, okay? But we don't live in a world like that, thankfully. Another way of putting that is we have no way of observing people's optimal choice. In other words, we do observe people's choice, but we don't know the process through which it has become optimal. 최적 선택은 봐요. 선택은 봅니다. The fact that I went to on the border, and then the fact that I'm about to go to, after this lecture, the fact that I'm about to go to a Thai place in Itaewon and going to have a takeaway for 4, and then invite my friends, couple around for just a sort of a housewarming thingy. That's the end product of the optimizing process, right? So you have to be able to turn the table around. Now, can you deduce people's preferences from their choice? Other way around. That's what we're going to do next week. But the reason why I'm telling you Cobb-Douglas preference is that there's a nice way of doing that, particularly if you observe that consumers behave like they spend a very stable fraction of income again and again and again. 10% on computer games, 5% on books, whatever. Then, generally, Cobb-Douglas is the way to go. Okay? More on MRS condition, etc., etc. Internal evaluation, external evaluation. That I talked about last Wednesday, and then that confused a lot of people, so I got a barrage of questions at the end of the lecture. So I think everyone's in a good place about this, right? Yeah? Your total pleasure from foreign travel and expensive wine may change depending on your income, depending on your social status, depending on the amount you consume. But if all of you face the same set of prices, then you will all subconsciously go through what? The optimizing process, where you equate your own rates of substitution with whatever that is being currently offered within that market. So it will all be the same. You will all, in equilibrium in this market, value one Pepero to one San Pellegrino. I think Pepero was 1101 last time I checked, and San Pel was 2501. So that's 11 over 25, or 25 over 11, whichever way you look at it. Then each one of your own internal rates of substitution in this market will also equal 25 over 11. I don't observe the process through which you did that, but I know that in equilibrium, in a clearing market, that will be the case. Or otherwise, we're going to have a chaos. Okay? So that's a sort of a philosophical thought to end the lecture on optimal choice, and now we're going to move on to demand, as I promised. Hopefully I can go through most of the material today, but I'm expecting some of the material will overrun to next Wednesday. So we're not going to go through the entire material in the lecture, so don't panic, by the way, okay? Now, what we have just done here, or if we do this is express x1, x2 in terms of p1, p2, and xn. By the way, notice from Cobb-Douglas function that the other goods price doesn't enter into your own equation. Okay? So you're treating each major category items like independent. There might be substitutes for Pocari Sweat, say Gatorade or Powerade or whatever, yeah? But the amount you spend on the sports drinks will be reasonably stable. That's the premise you're making on the Cobb-Douglas. Okay? Now, if we have P1, P2, and M, we can now engage in comparative statics. In other words, what if we change the price of good 1 or good 2 or income? How will this affect your optimal choice? How will your choice change? So, first of all, let's focus on income. Now, there are two important notions here which are called normal and inferior goods. Okay? I always motivate this. Okay, so 우리 학생 이름이 한대건 학생 다음 주까지 기억할게요. 매칭할게요. Suppose that I don't know whether 한대건 학생 is single or not. I'll assume he is. Suppose you're on a blind date, but you don't have that much money. So and then you gotta get to say 신사역 by 6 o'clock. Okay? I finish my lecture 5:15, and suppose I suddenly told you that your blind date is being set up with 설현 of AOA. Okay? You're gonna get there as fast as you can, right? But how are you gonna go there? Subway, right? But if I suddenly say, okay, let's get this sorted. Let's make this happen. And then if I were to give you 100,000 won to spend on your blind date, how are you going to get there? Probably not just taxi, but you're going to use Kakao Black or something to give a good impression, right? You're going to arrive on your E-Class Mercedes and then, hi, I'm Handaegon, yeah? Just like that, facial expression, sorted, yeah? That's the notion of a normal good. Your demand increases as, complete the sentence, your income increases. Foreign travel, wine, again, you know, Chateau Petrus or whatever, those are some nice wines you have. So there's an interesting example I can give you with wine. Now, it's a finance-related example, actually. Generally, the best years for wine for Bordeaux are 1945, 1952, 1961, 1968, 1973, 82, 90, whatever. And those are about 7 or 8 years that are really famous. Particularly 1945, in other words, the year when Europe became free again, the VE year, has not only it has incredible amount of emotional and sentimental value in people's memory, but it's one of the best years on record in terms of wine's quality. It rained when it had to rain, it stayed really hot when it had to be hot, and then there were no grapes or anything like that, okay? So 1945 Bordeaux wines, especially the top 5 ones, Chateau Latour, Margaux, Lafite, Mouton, and Aubryon, these 5 ones are the status symbols. You don't drink it for the wine itself. It's a status symbol. It's a symbol of your success. 2006, 61 years back, put it forward, 2006 was the year on record in terms of profits in the financial industry, particularly on Wall Street and the city. Now, a strange report came out that the total quantity of wines sold in New York and London of 1945 top 5 Bordeaux wine was greater than the actual quantity of production of 1945 wines. Meaning, some of them were fake counterfeits. Yep. I mean, you have to put in a really good wine, otherwise people don't notice. But like, so a mediocre, okay year Margaux, say like 1954 or 1957, it's a good year, not an amazing year, but sells at a fraction of value to 1945 wine. So if you get the bottle, switch the contents, redo the corking, put in a really old cork just to be sure, then we have another bottle of 1945 wine that nobody notices. But can you see how the demand for that sort of top quality wine skyrockets as the income in the financial industry skyrockets? Yeah? So there's, I mean, that's the sort of a top end of the story, but another end of the story is going back to the private tuition end of things. Yeah? I mean, nowadays apparently there are loads of reports of the parents spending on private tuition falling down. It is actually a normal good. I mean, people always thought parents would give up on food and clothing and housing and everything to save private tuition for their kids. But nowadays, its return on investment is so low. Yeah? I mean, you guys would know better than I do. Yeah? There's a tendency to apply for group 공무원 without going to university nowadays, for example. Okay? So those sort of goods are normal goods. That wine would be classified as something called luxury good that we're going to talk about soon. Okay? Now, but there are conceivably inferior goods too. Okay? Subway was the inferior good. I'm giving you 100,000 won extra to spare. What are you going to do? I'm not going on the subway anymore. I'm not going on that bus anymore. I'm not going on the hideous 471 bus trip from Gangnam-yeok to Ide all the way on Saturday at 6 p.m. just to go on a blind date. Never a good idea, by the way. Don't ever do that, guys. 40 minutes late on a blind date and getting told off by, 야, 또 뭐 한 거야? And then, nah, okay? So those are conceivably what we call inferior goods, okay? These are called normal goods that has the property of an income change of, say, positive income change brings about positive change in the optimal bundle, your optimal demand of that bundle, okay? So this X1 and X2 will satisfy that property, yeah? M goes up, X1 goes up, M goes up, X2 goes up. Those are traits of a normal good, okay? But here's another thing. Whether a good is inferior or normal depends on the income level, okay? It's not a normal good for everyone, okay? So, for example, on a direct return trip from Seoul to New York would be a normal good for most of us, for me as well. I mean, if I have an extra income, I would clearly go on that direct flight to New York on economy class. I would love to see, Manhattan, go to see a Broadway show, etc., right? But if your name is Jo Hyuna, that's going to be an inferior good, chances are, right? And, first class with top quality macadamia nuts served on the right way will be the only way to satisfy you. And economy class return trip just wouldn't do. So what I'm saying is this, income level. Whether you perceive a good to be normal or inferior depends on your own income level, okay? What I perceive to be normal doesn't necessarily correspond to what someone like 이재용 회장님 or someone 정용진 부회장님 would consider to be normal, okay? So a normal good is like this. Now, what happened to the budget set here? They moved out parallel. What does that represent? An increase in income. Or a relative fall in prices. It doesn't matter. Yeah? If P1 and P2 fall by the same amount, it's just like increased income. Yeah? When X is a normal good, your optimal choice would go from here to here. Yep. What that means is what? It's a normal good. It increases. Your optimal demand for X1 increases as income increases. Okay? But it's quite difficult to draw. But look at this. Suppose you had an optimal point like here, but following an income increase, you're spending somewhere here, somewhere to the left. You're spending less on X1 and a lot more on X2. So taxi, 한대건 학생 spends loads of amount on taxi and reduces his spending of subway. Subway is the inferior good. Now, can you deduce one thing? Both goods can be normal, okay. One good can be inferior. Never, ever assume that two goods, both goods can be. If one's consumption goes down, the other must go up. In other words, if this has gone up, you can't spend to the left of here, right? 하나가 열등자일 수는 있습니다. 두 개 중에. 둘 다 열등자일 수는 없습니다. 무언가 내 새로 생긴 인컴을 뭐 하나에는 더 써야 될 테니까요. It's just repeating the same stuff in Korean, okay? So you're already at our week 6 to week 7 lecture in intertemporal choice. Great. But let me give you a quick answer to that. That 100,000 won doesn't come all the time. So you wouldn't spend up the entire 100,000 won. Okay? But you will still spend some of it. You spread out that consumption over the years, okay? And it will be very small response. Say, I might spend, say, 5,000 won out of extra 100,000. Yeah? But your lifetime income, present value of your lifetime income certainly has increased, which means you will respond at least a little bit to it. You're not going to get a zero response. You're going to get somewhere near X1. Yes, that's conceivable. But spending no amount will be violating the sort of intertemporal optimization theory. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. So here's an important concept that we should be familiar with. Something called income offer curve, or income consumption curve is another name you get, ICC or IOC. Suppose we gradually shift the budget line out, okay? Start from here. Suppose we do like this, okay? I could have done the animation on PowerPoint, but that meant drawing about 150 lines. By the way, I'm making my own lecture slides throughout, and I'm beginning to have enormous amount of respect for the Disney people. I mean, like coloring each frame 100 per second. I don't know how they do that. But anyway, let's suppose we shift out the budget constraint like that. For each given level of income, we're going to have each unique choice of optimal consumption, right? So if we gradually move it like that, 100 a frame like this, we're going to have a collection of points of optimal consumption, right? 생각해 보세요. 예산선을 0에서부터 천천히 이렇게 나간다고 하면 각각의 예산선 포인트들마다 옵티멀한 요 지점들이 점점점점점점점 선으로 모일 거 아니에요. 그죠? Right? That's what we call income offer curve, or it's also known as income expansion curve. So you will have a one-to-one mapping, to use the terminology in math department. For each given level of income, you're going to have a mapping of your optimal X1, X2 consumption. Yeah? 하나의 M마다 그에 대응하는 옵티멀한 X1, X2가 있을 거란 얘기입니다. 그죠? If you collect them together, you have income offer curve like this. It's clearly going to pass through the origin. 0에선 0이죠. And then it's going to go like this. You're going to pass through the optimal choice at each given m level. Is this clear? If you're not, please ask questions. But I mean, all I'm saying is I'm infinitesimally increasing your income by cent by cent by cent, or in Korean, one by one by one. That has a double meaning, one as in number and one as in currency. Yeah, and then for each one, you're gonna get each optimal point, right? If you join them together, this is what we get. Yep. Okay. So you can read off the x1 coordinate for each mapping of m. 각각의 m에마다 그에 맞는 x1, x2가 있을 거란 말입니다. 그죠? 수학과에서 오신 분들 같은 경우 이해가 빠르시겠습니다. 그죠? So what that means is you can draw another curve where it's not on an x2, x1 scale anymore, but let's put m on top. And x1, that tells you the relationship between the good in question, 그 재화와 your income. Yep. Clearly this angle curve will again pass through origin. If you don't have any income, you can't buy anything. But it's gonna go like this. So suppose this corresponds to 10. 이게 10이라는 인컴에 해당하는 버젯 컨스트레인트고 그때의 x1 좌표가 3이라면 얘가 10일 때 얘가 3이어야 된다는 얘기죠. That's the translation from income offer curve into angle curve. For each budget constraint represents unique level of income. For each unique level of income, you're going to have a unique optimal choice, unique x1, x2 coordinate. So, read off that x1 coordinate and then plot the optimal x1's relationship with m, then you have angle curve. Okay? So income offer curve and angle curve are related, but they are not the same concept. One is on an x1, x2 plane. One is on x1, m plane. So, fabric softener example. Perfect substitutes example. Okay? So, you don't mind whether you have 10 ml of concentrate or 50 ml of normal stuff. Well, suppose they both cost the same. Then you're going to be spending your entire income on the cheaper one, the concentrate one, the relatively cheaper one, right? Then your income offer curve will be like this. Optimal choice will be always be buying more and more of x1. And angle curve, because you're going to be spending entire amount of your income on that concentrate fabric softener, right? concentrate에만 다 살 거 아니에요, 그죠? So you would divide it by 5p1, okay? Then m equals 5p1 x1. So that's the slope we have. It's going to be a straight line with slope given as follows. That's the characteristic of a perfect substitute. You're going to be buying one good, and the angle curve works out to be like a straight line, straight upward line. Same with perfect complements. Printer-Turner example, or left shoe, right shoe example, okay? So let's motivate this. You might have x1 as left shoe and x2 as right shoe. No one's going to be buying 10 of left shoe and none of right shoe. So you're going to be spending in one-to-one relationship, one-to-one pairing, right? So you're going to be spending income based on assuming the price of left shoe and right shoe is the same, like this, right? One-to-one ratio. Okay? So that is going to be how much you're going to be spending on x1 and x2. Also going to be the same. So in that case, we're going to have m as p1 plus p2 x2. So once again, we're going to have a straight line going up in slope, p1 plus p2. Or in our printer example, p1 plus 3p2. But you can see now why that will be the case. Okay? I'll leave it for you to do the own work. Cobb-Douglas preferences also give you straight line. Look at this. You're going to have m as p1 over a x1. For given p1, that's a constant, that's a constant. So it's going to be a constant line. Angle curve will be constant. So I've given you about 3 possible scenarios. I mean, I can't really think of other scenarios where you're going to have a straight line angle curve. But the 3 main ones that we consider, namely perfect substitutes, perfect complements, and Cobb-Douglas, we end up with this result, namely that the angle curve is a straight line. Okay? But we all talk about goods in terms of luxury good and necessary good. Something is a necessity. Something is a luxury. Now, that's an abstract concept. That's a very abstract concept. But in microeconomics, it has a specific meaning. And if an angle curve is not a straight line but swings this way, in other words, to the right of the 45-degree line, can anyone explain to me what's going on here? If m goes up, how does your demand for x1 changes? A lot or a little? A lot. m이 조금만 바뀌어도 점점 어떻게 됩니까? x1. 많이 바뀌죠? 그죠? That's something called a luxury good. Or another way of putting it is if you learn about elasticity, 탄력성이라는 개념을 알면 it's where the income elasticity of demand is greater than 1. But we're not going to talk about that, okay? All I'm saying in terms of this angle curve being sloping like that, concave, is that if you get gradually more and more and more and more income, you're going to be demanding a lot more and more of that good. Okay? Wine being a good example. When I was in the military academy, my income was very little. I mean, until you get to captain, for lieutenant, 소위 중위는, basically you get about 1/3 of what I earn now, or 1/4 of. Okay? At that point, spending on wine seemed like such a, not waste, but there were better uses. But nowadays, I don't really go for like really expensive wines. I still can't afford it. But like something like 30,000 won wines or something like that. After a long week, after having battled with my child and finally got her to sleep at 11 p.m., opening a nice bottle of wine would be a great thing. So that's what I do. And for me, then, wine would be considered a luxury good. Okay? But a necessary good is something different. It's something you've got to have regardless of income. So it doesn't fall that much as income falls, but conversely, your demand for it doesn't rise as much or as fast as the increase in income. Good example being diapers. Okay? Because, while I was in the military academy, at even at my 1/4 or 1/3 of income, you gotta have diapers for your child. 기저귀 없이 그냥 아빠가 돈이 없으니까 그냥 너는 그냥 바닥에 싸라. 이거 아니잖아요. You're not gonna do that. Yeah? So you gotta buy a certain amount of diapers to go through the week, go through the month. Yes. But conversely, just because I'm earning a lot more now, it doesn't mean I'm going to be spending a year's supply of diapers like per week. I'm not going to do like any abstract art with like diapers or anything like that. So I'm not going to be spending that much money. That's what we mean by a necessary good. Rice, kimchi, for Koreans especially. To an extent, soju is also a necessary good in Korea for main reasons. I mean, like, if you're in manual labor, it's what gets you through the day. So, like, if you go to a construction site, which I've done a few times, people live on soju, especially the workers. They do. I mean, that's the only thing that will get them through the day. So they're going to be just drinking half a bottle with jjajangmyeon or whatever, and then go through, and they're basically like addicted to alcohol. For them, it's a necessary good. And second reason why it's more or less a necessary good in Korea is called 회식. No 회식 without alcohol. Unfortunately, that's Korea for you guys. I mean, I think the drinking culture you're already sort of being exposed to a little bit with other Korean friends you met, right? Presumably, no? Not really? Surprising that. But, so you can think of, you can imagine what would constitute a necessary good in your life and what would constitute a luxury good in your life. And these are sort of questions that you can ask really well in exam, rather than saying calculate this and trying to be, determine whether it's a luxury good or not. That's one way of approaching and setting the exam. Another way is give me an example of a luxury good in your life and tell me why. Without knowing the exact definition of a luxury good, you can't answer that question. Yep. Ordinary goods and given goods. Now, we move on from our discussion of income, okay? Now, we focus on X1, the good one. I don't know, be it formula milk, 분유, whatever, okay? And then price of that own good. Now, holding income fixed, if the price of 분유 or formula goes up, how is that going to affect my demand? It's going to go down, right? I mean, that's what we would ordinarily expect it to happen. So that's our basic intuition, and this is called an ordinary good, okay? So ordinary good is like this. Suppose that the price of a formula milk or 분유 decreases, I would go like that. So optimal choice going on like from here to here. I buy more of X1 as a result. Okay? Not a problem. What is conceivable, however, is another scenario, another really absurd scenario that you only observe in theory, mainly. I can't think of a good example, where it is theoretically possible to construct a scenario where a decrease in the price of good 1 actually reduces the demand for good 1. Now, looking at it this week, you're going to be thinking, what? But I think you have to wait until next week's material on Slutsky equation to know this. This type of good is called a given good, or in Korean, 기쁜제. Okay? Now, okay. Suppose you're living only on bad quality rice, like straight imported from random factory that you don't even recognize, and eggs. Okay? And suppose the price of bad quality rice falls. Okay? that frees your money up to buy more eggs. And suddenly you might think, hang on, now that I have this many eggs, I may actually just consume more of eggs. Really, really, really more, like a lot more number of eggs, and decline my consumption of bad quality rice. Okay? How I can rationalize that is like this. Okay. Now, can you see how difficult I am in explaining this sort of stuff, right? So it's really unlikely to happen in reality. But, okay, so follow me on this. Suppose that you're consuming, I don't know, about 500 grams of rice a week, and you have enough eggs to make one fried egg per breakfast, okay? But suppose the price of rice declines to the extent that you now have enough money to make fried egg for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then you might think, just short of money, just short of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then you love eggs so much to the extent that, oh, actually, I might just cut on rice a little further and ensure that I have fried egg for each meal. Okay? That's just about the best scenario I can make. Okay? It's highly, highly, highly unlikely to happen in reality, but the problem is theoretically, 이론적으로는요, you can't rule it out. So that's unfortunately the main reason why we have to learn about this thing called Giffen good. And let me just tell you one thing. It's a sort of a preview for next week. Now, next week we're going to break down the impact of a price change to something called substitution effect, 대체 효과, and income effect, 소득 효과. Okay? That will tell you that this sort of a Giffen good has to be a really, really, really inferior good. That's the only way you can rationalize it. It's a preview, okay? A normal good cannot ever be a Giffen good, but an inferior good theoretically can. That's why I gave you this example based on bad quality rice. Yeah? If you're just short of having fried eggs for each meal, you might think, okay, what the heck's the big deal in having 500 grams of rice a week or 450? Shit, anyway. So you might think, okay, I'm going to cut down my spending on bad rice and ensure that I have fried egg every meal. So that's the sort of the logic through which Giffen good works, and that is why we're going to stop here and we're going to run into that Slutsky equation on next week's lecture. And I have kept my promise on 5:10 promise, so end of the lecture. Have a great weekend. Apparently, it's going to rain tomorrow, so bring an umbrella out if you're going out in the morning. And see you on Wednesday.